The great discovery for me is that if you're going to write about a disaster, a love story is probably the best choice. The effect on a catastrophe on relationships is the most visible manifestation of what's happened inside of the human beings who've gone through that disaster. Theater seemed to me a mechanism by which I could very quickly have these stories mounted and reach audiences. A novel takes at least a year to write and then another year until the book is released. With the play, we were able to have it on stage at Southern Rep, which was then a Canal Place, 18 months after the levee collapse. It also allowed me to tighten the frame sufficiently so I could look at one aspect of the story. What it was like to be trapped in a house in the pitch black with the water suddenly rising and no warning that in the next 10 minutes the water might come up 8 feet. So the play as a structure was a means by which I could quickly begin to talk about what had happened to us. A theater is located in a particular city. I think only one of Shakespeare's plays was ever shown in his lifetime outside of London. He was writing for his neighbors in London. So plays have to do with the city in which they're produced. The actors on stage speak our English. You hear our accent in their voices. The plays, Rising Water and then Shotgun and finally Mold, raise questions for New Orleanians to consider and then to talk together about in the forum that the theater provides. One of the problems of trying to tell a story about the destruction of a city is that there's nothing in the canon of American literature that might show us how to do that. So I started looking at post-war German writers, Japanese writers after the Kobe earthquake to see what they had done to talk about destructions of cities. And they had invariably gone back deep into their mythologies to find images and narrative structures that would work. New Orleans is about to celebrate its 300th anniversary, so we don't have that kind of mythology. But I thought that architecture, which is expressive both of our climate and our culture, might be a way of structuring these narratives. In my travels, and particularly my travels abroad in the year following, what I discovered was a profound affection for New Orleans. One person who had read my columns in Tokyo wrote back and said, "Don't the Americans understand New Orleans doesn't belong to the United States? It belongs to the world." I think anyone who spent one night in New Orleans claims New Orleans as his or her own city, and it will go on being important to that person forever. Just the way we care about whether or not Venice floods, or if you've visited Paris, you always think of Paris as partly yours. Anybody who's come to New Orleans feels that way and feels that sense of ownership and protectiveness. So I was struck by how important New Orleans is, if not to the United States, at least to the world.